Thank you so much for joining with me. I'm Robin Singler, and I'm going to be continuing my reading from the workbook today of A Course in Miracles. So today we're reading from Foundation for Inner Peace, 2nd edition of A Course in Miracles in the workbook, part 2. This reading comes directly after lesson 330. And it is number 12 in part 2. And so in this section of the workbook, I've been reading this definition of what is the ego every morning along with my lesson. And as a student and practitioner and facilitator of A Course in Miracles and a minister, I am still, like everyone else, catching myself blaming the ego for everything. The ego is the villain, it turns out. Oh, my ego, oh, my ego, oh, my ego. What in the heck is this thing? It seems to take a life of its own, as if it's a separate identity that needs to be eradicated or culled from the mind. And maybe it's helpful to see it that way in some phases of learning, but I find this definition to be very useful as the workbook wraps up. The year of the daily lessons is closing, and it really helps to solidify what exactly we are doing here and what is this ego thing. And in the world outside of A Course in Miracles practice, of course, everybody has a different way of looking at the ego as well, so it can get quite muddy, and it can get quite easy to generalize and to really lose focus on what we are talking about here with the ego. Is it really a separate self outside of me that is out to get me? Where is it? Of course, it is in the mind. Everything is mind, as we are taught in A Course in Miracles. And yet, what is this ego? It seems to have a life of its own, and yet where does it come from? What is it? So let's see what Jesus has to say about that in this latter part of the workbook, as we're really going for an experience and going for a building of trust that will take us beyond the workbook, that will take us beyond words and reading sayings throughout the day. What will help us actually understand what we're talking about here about the ego thought system. It is a thought system. That is one thing to keep in mind that's very useful. It's a thought system. It's not a person. It's not a place. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's a thought system. It's a belief system. BS. Belief system. I love that. That's just perfect. All right, let's see what Jesus gives us here to make this really, really clear for us. What is the ego? The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer, and to end its life in death. It is the will that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. Okay. The ego is idolatry, the holding of idols. The ego thought system is the keeping of idols separate from the truth, separate from unconditional love from God. It is the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to die. So we're told many times in this teaching that the body is the home of the ego, and it is pretty much the temple of the ego. You could say it that way or think of it that way. It is the home that the thought system chose to hide in. So the ego is false idols. The ego is a separated and limited self-concept. It comes to life or is born in the body, and it dies in the body. It is the will, meaning false will, separate will, that sees the will of God or the plan of God as its enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. That's really important for me to remember, that this ego identity has been denied by me in my mind, not by Robin. Robin's a creation of the ego, a miscreation of the ego, a character. I'm not Robin. The ego takes a form in which it is denied. The will of God is denied. What also comes to mind, it takes a form in the body so that its own existence, the ego's existence, can be denied. No ego here. We're bodies. We're people. We're real. So it's interesting that that just came in as well. Could be seen to be saying that, reminding me that the ego is being denied and being pushed into the unconscious through making its home in a body, by imagining itself as a body and being real in a real world. The ego is insane. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God Himself. And in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. So the ego thought system is insane. That's good news. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all. Everywhere meaning God's truth, the infinite, the quantum field, oneness. It stands outside of that, stands apart from it, and it denies the truth. It thinks it has become a victor over God Himself. This line 4 in paragraph 2 here is a very important line for me. And in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed. Autonomy is not really thought of in this world as being terrible. Certainly not. Autonomy is seen as strength. I'm independent. I stand alone. I'm strong all by myself. I don't need anybody. I don't need you. I don't even like you. I'm going to be autonomous. I'm going to take care of myself. I don't need anybody else. I don't need anything else. I don't need to learn. I already know everything. Terrible autonomy. That is a powerful phrase. Terrible autonomy. And so the ego positions me outside of truth, outside of oneness, in an attempt to be separate. That's its intention. That is no accident that that experience comes into my awareness as a person in this world. That is no accident. That is not a coincidence. That is not some kind of twist of fate. There's no mystery around it. It's pretty clear that that's the goal in the ego thought system. It dreams of punishment, fantasizes about punishment. I know I see that in my mind regularly, dreaming of punishment and yet hoping for release all at the same time. It trembles at the figures in its dream, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. This is a very interesting description of the interplay between myself and the other in the dream. This belief that there is an other out there. My friends, my family, my other bodies. Doesn't matter what they look like. Bodies I've known a long time, bodies I'm very familiar with, bodies that are strangers. It's all the same, really, isn't it? Dreams of punishment, trembles at these figures in the dream. The enemy is outside of me. It's not in my mind. It's out there. Who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them. So in my feeble attempts at safety, I attack. I'm not defending myself against a real attack, a real threat. I'm defending myself by attacking first. That's not defense. That's just attack. That's not justified. So these first two paragraphs are pretty stark and clear about what this ego thought system is, what this ego concept is, what this self-concept is. It's idolatry, it's separation, it lives in the body is its home, it's doomed to suffer, it dies, it's the will that opposes the will of God. It is the proof that autonomy is possible, even though we're learning that's actually not true. It is the false proof then that autonomy is possible, independence is possible. It's a false proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, and that life is really death, and that what opposes God is true and real. The ego is insane. It stands apart from oneness. It is a symbol of autonomy and independence. It claims to be victorious over God, which is just the love or the truth that is real. And it seeks to murder to keep itself safe. It's pretty bleak. And yet in paragraph 3, the Son of God is egoless. The Son of God is egoless, lacking in ego. There is no ego in the Son of God. You are the Son of God. I am the Son of God. Everything that lives is the Son of God. Everything, everyone's included in the sonship. The Son of God is egoless. That's great. I'm so glad. I've read this line many times in the last couple of weeks, and I'm very grateful every time I do. Thank you for saying that, Jesus. What can he know of madness and the death of God when he abides in him, capital H, him, and the Creator? What can he know of sorrow and of suffering when he lives in eternal joy? What can he know of fear and punishment, of sin and guilt, of hatred and attack, when all there is surrounding him is everlasting peace, forever conflict-free and undisturbed, in deepest silence and tranquility? Son of God is egoless. To know reality is not to see the ego in its thoughts, its works, its acts, its laws, and its beliefs, its dreams, its hopes, its plans for its salvation, and the cost that belief in it entails. So to know reality is to not acknowledge the ego. In suffering, the price for faith in it is so immense. That crucifixion of the Son of God is offered daily at its darkened shrine, and blood must flow before the altar where its sickly followers prepare to die. And this description of the toll it takes on the mind and therefore the body, it's reflected everywhere around us, is merely the price that is paid to believe in the ego, to believe that it's real, to believe that that's who I am. And I will say I understand that from experience. And perhaps you do too. If we wonder why we suffer, why we do feel crucified by others, by ourselves, why we hate ourselves so much. Why do I hate myself so much? Why can't I stop? I try to change my behavior and that doesn't work either. Why can't I stop hating myself? Why can't I stop lashing out in anger? Why can't I stop abusing my body to try to numb myself from these feelings? In suffering, the price for faith in the ego is immense. That is why I suffer. Because I believe I'm something that I'm not. I believe in my ego thoughts. I believe they're real. I believe that they have consequence. I believe I'm joined with what reflects death and suffering and guilt. I think I'm joined with this world on a fundamental level, and it is very painful. Very painful to lay my faith down at the ego's feet. It does feel like being crucified, doesn't it? It feels like martyrdom. It feels like self-aggrandizement and self-deprecation all at once. It feels alone, like everyone is against me, like there are enemies everywhere. It feels so permanent too, doesn't it, at times? So permanent, there's nothing to be done about it. And what wonderful news to read that the Son of God, all of us are egoless. We don't have egos. I don't have an ego. There's an ego belief system, but I don't have an ego. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me, and I don't have to keep believing in it. And so after Jesus explains to us in paragraph 4 the price we pay for having faith in the ego, its thoughts, its laws, its beliefs, its hopes, he tells us, yet will one lily of forgiveness, change the darkness into light, the altar to illusions, to the shrine of life itself. And peace will be restored forever to the holy minds which God created as his Son. His dwelling place, his joy, his love, completely his, completely one with him. Completely his, completely one with him. Him with love. Not a man in the sky. Love, quantum love, radical love, oneness. One lily of forgiveness. Jesus talks about lilies 24 times in this teaching. And the lily of forgiveness, the lily is, of course, the Easter lily. It's white. It is a symbol of innocence. And so when he talks about giving lilies to your brother and to yourself, he talks about blessing them and yourself with innocence. And that is Christ's vision. That is true vision. That is vision that sees oneness, not separation, not death, not pain, not suffering, not guilt, not autonomy. Sees oneness, one love behind all of these dream images, just the one love. The lily of forgiveness grants that. It is a gift. And it changes the darkness into light. And it restores our mind to peace, restores our mind to the truth. It is the antidote to the ego belief system, the BS system. And that's the goal. To lay down this ego, this false prophet, you could say, this false identity, this belief system that says death is real, separation is real, I have to fend for myself. I don't have to fend for myself. There is no myself. I can't be separate. The ego is just a symbol of the belief in what's not true. It is not true. So there's two things that I carry with me as I go about my day to day. Is the Son of God is egoless. And I carry with me the lily of forgiveness that restores peace to the holy minds which God created as His Son. There's no need to be afraid of just an idea. The ego is a terrible idea. It's a very uncomfortable, painful idea, and yet I can choose again. And I can choose to look at it without judgment. I can choose to let it go and accept the truth instead. That sounds like a great way to use the rest of the day today and every day going forward. Thank you so much for joining with me and sharing this teaching with me. May the mind of God and His Son be at peace today. May the mind be healed and extend lilies of forgiveness. Love you. Have a beautiful day.